Hey class. So this is the first video tutorial I'm doing for MMP310. I'm gonna go over week 6 objects again from scratch. I know a lot of people missed the last class that we had, and I think it's a good opportunity to kind of go over how to set up your home computer or whatever computer you're using now in order to do these projects. So I'll go over basic setup, GitHub, Sublime Text, all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna get into that. So this video is gonna be a little long because I'm gonna spend some time just getting things set up, and then I'm gonna go over objects and class inheritance and create a project from scratch. So I'm gonna get started with that. I'll put some like markers in the YouTube video, so if you want to skip over the setup part, you can go straight to the demo part. I'm still kind of learning the software, so bear with me. I'm gonna try out some different stuff and see how it goes, and hopefully over the next few weeks, I'll kind of get a basic setup down. Let's just get into it. I'm gonna get rid of the video window. Don't really need that. Just wanted to kind of say hi. I hope everybody's doing well with whatever you are, and staying inside and staying safe. It's definitely going to be a kind of a complicated situation for the next few weeks, but I think we can do everything that we were planning on doing and figure out ways to do it online. And so just going to start with these video tutorials. In some ways these might actually be useful because you can pause the video and go over stuff, and obviously the disadvantage to that is if I'm working on something and it doesn't make sense, or you don't understand it, you can't stop me and ask me to go over it again. So if you do have questions while you're watching the video, I'm going to create a discussion thread on Blackboard. So just put the question in there. If you have any comments or suggestions, or just say like, oh, what if I wanted to do this or that? I'll be happy to add new examples or new shorter videos or other things like that. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a shot. We'll see how it goes. If you have any thoughts or comments or anything, let me know. And so I'm on the Mac. We're usually on the Mac in the classroom, so that's fine. If you happen to have a Windows at home, that's fine. Most of this stuff will be basically the same on Mac or Windows. But if you have any questions about how to set something up on a Windows, I can help you out with that. Just let me know. So the first thing to look at is basically the software. So if you don't already have the software on your computer at home, it's all easy to get to if you just go to the home page of our class site, MMP310. And then if you go down to the software section right here, there's two links to text editors. I'm going to be using Sublime. Some of you guys are more familiar with brackets, and if you want to use brackets, that's totally cool. The browser, Chrome, if you don't have it, usually you already have it, but if you don't, you can download it there. And then finally, GitHub Desktop, which we've been using this semester. You can download that from there as well. I'm going to get started. And so since we've already basically started the class and we already have a bunch of stuff on the cloud, you can see now I'm on my home computer, and I have my folder for a different class that I teach, MMP210, but I don't have my MMP310 folder here. And so obviously I want to clone the GitHub repo onto my desktop to get started. So I'm just going to open up GitHub. And you can see I have like a little key thing on there. I don't know if this is actually helpful, but you can kind of see if I'm doing special keys, it'll show you in there. And I have like a screen drawing tool that I'm going to try out as well. Anyway, I'm going to open up GitHub, so I can go to the Spotlight and just type in GitHub. So I open the Spotlight by doing Command Space, which is, you can see that in the lower left corner. You can also just click on the Spotlight up here. And just type in GitHub and then click on that. And you can see I have GitHub open, but I'm actually on a different repository, the MMP210 repository. So you might see something else. You might need to sign in or do something like that. But regardless of where you are, if you want to get your MMP310 repository, we can go to File and click Clone Repository. And that'll bring up a little dialog box, and we can see there's some options there. Oops, I forgot to actually click on an option. So I'll go back to Clone Repository. From github.com, we can see all the repositories that we have. So here's my MMP310 right there. And I want to make sure to put that on my desktop. So I want to click the Choose button, choose Desktop, and click Open. The default will probably be somewhere in your Documents folder. It's okay if it's there, but it's a little easier if it's on the desktop. That makes things easier that you know where it is, you can see it. So once I've got that set up with the local path, I'm going to click Clone. And we should see MMP310 right here. So now we've got it on our desktop. And from here, we can actually do a bunch of different stuff. So I'm still in GitHub desktop, but you can see I have a few options to open in Sublime Text, show in Finder, or view on GitHub. So if I click show in Finder, I'm going to see those files right there in the Finder window. So that's just my folder right here, but opened up in the Finder. I can also, it's detected that I use Sublime Text, so I can click here and open in Sublime Text. And so that'll open up that MMP310 folder right there. So that's pretty convenient. I can also just drag the folder over to the dock, and if I have Sublime Text open, I can open it like that. If I have Sublime Text open on the Mac, I can also just go to File, Open, and go to the desktop and choose MMP310. So all of those are good ways to get it open on your computer. So then I'm going to go back over to GitHub. And you can see I do this in class a lot, but just in case you don't do this on the Mac, to switch between programs, I usually use Command Tab. You can see it brings up all the different programs, and then I can easily switch between them. So I'm going to go back to GitHub. Another thing I can do is view my repo on GitHub, so that'll bring me to where my code is. So that's a nice convenient link as well. So now I'm basically set up. The last thing that I need to set up is I need a local server. Since we've been working with images a lot, I need to be running a local server. And since when we were working at BMCC, we used that terminal application to create a local server and then go to the local host. And you can still do that at home if you're on the Mac. It's a little trickier on PC, but if you want to do that on PC, I can show you how to do it. On the Mac, it's still pretty easy. I just open up a terminal window. So I'll go to Spotlight, type in terminal, hit enter, and then I don't see a window, so I'll just go to new window. And that'll open up a new window. Yours might look a little different from mine. Yours is probably white. But you'll see it's open to this tilde sign. Maybe make that a little bigger. So what we did in class is we would go to the tilde, which is your user folder, and then I would do cd desktop and then slash MMP310. That would bring me to my MMP310 folder. So that's right there. I can also do open dot to open it in the Finder, but I don't need to do that. And then I would just say python-m simple HTTP server, and that would open a local server. Unless you're using Python 3, in which case, let's see what that is. Python 3 simple HTTP server. So I actually recently upgraded my Python, and so they changed some of the commands. So you might see this. So let's try that. So python-m simple dot, or wait, no, http.server. Okay, so that works as well. Again, this is just one way to do it. So if I go to localhost now 8080, or 8000 rather, I'll see my 310 project. So that's good. That's one way to get there. But I don't have to do that actually, because part of the reason we do this at BMCC is we don't actually have permissions to change things about Sublime Text. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate how you would create a server just using Sublime. So it's a little bit more like the live preview in brackets, or something that you can do easily at home, since you probably should have permissions on your own computer. So again, either way you want to do this, Either option is valid. And if neither of them work for you, just let me know. We can set up a screen share and go over the best way to set it up. So I'm going to close the local server in the terminal, and I'm going to leave this. And so the only real advantage of doing the Sublime based server is that you don't have to leave Sublime. So you don't have to have two different programs open. So the way that I would do that is there's a couple things I need to do, and I'll post some longer instructions for this along with the video. So once I've got Sublime open, if I go into tools, I have this thing called command palette. You might not see that. You may see something that says install the command palette. You can just click on that. And then once you do that, you will see the command palette here. So when I click on the command palette, it brings up this interface. And if I type in here, so this is just a text interface. I just type, I don't have to click on anything. If I type install, it'll go to package control install package. And if I hit enter, it'll open a new text window. So when I go to the command palette and I type in install and choose install package, type in SublimeServer. Okay, so it'll be the first one that comes up. It does say dead project. It's not being maintained anymore, but it still works. So it's still useful for our purposes. So I'll just hit enter. That'll take a second to install. And when we come back here, SublimeServer and start SublimeServer. And so if it's working, nothing will happen. But you'll see that now it says stop or restart. And so once we have that server going, now we can go to a slightly different URL. It's actually localhost 8080. Okay, so once you have it running, you can open a new tab, go to localhost 8080 and hit enter. And now let's see the Sublime server. You can click on MMP310 and there it is. So either way you want to set that up, you do need to be running a server, so you see that localhost. For the Python server, it uses 8000. For Sublime, it uses 8080. Either way, it should work the same way. And so now we can see all our projects here. Here's the scene that we did last time, and all of our other projects. So what I'm going to do today is just record creating this scene project from scratch. So I can go over some of the basic stuff and make sure that you can kind of follow along and get everything set up. So that we have everything we need to do the distance learning stuff. So some of it will be a little repetitive. I'll kind of like add links to different parts so that you can go over it, but it's probably not a bad idea to kind of refresh our memory of some of these things. So that's what I'm going to do today. So I'll make a new project and I'll just kind of start from scratch. So that's everything I need to do to get set up, and I'm going to get into the demo. Okay, so I'm here in Sublime. I want to make sure to add a link to my new project first. So I'm going to open up index.html. I'm going to increase the font size a little bit. So even though we're not in the classroom, I still want it to be visible on the video. So I'm not going to make it quite as big as I do in class, but hopefully this will be visible. If you guys want me to make it bigger or smaller for some reason, just let me know and I'll do that in the next video. So I'm going to add a new link. I already did this class example once, so I'm just going to do it again. So I'm going to add a list item, and then I'm going to say href, and we'll call this new class. And I'll just say new class example, or I haven't been using examples, so I'll just leave that out. And then I'll close my anchor tag and I'll close my list item. And so now I have a new link on my main page. And if I go over to Chrome and reload, here's my new class. And you can see I haven't actually built that page yet, so that's why I get the error response. That's okay. I'm going to move this into the middle a little bit, actually. So let's go back and actually build that. So for the new project, I need a new folder. I can go to the Finder. So I can go to GitHub and just go to view, show in Finder for this repo. I can also, I have my Finder docked over here. I can go to new Finder window and then go to my desktop and go to 310. However you want to do it is fine. So I have this class folder and I'm going to copy this, or at least some of it, because I want to use my images and stuff like that, but I want to kind of start from scratch. So I'm going to create a new folder. I can do Command-Shift-N and then call this new class. or I can always go to the Finder file and do new folder there as well. Either way is fine. So I'm just going to delete that. So in the new class folder, I'm going to put some of the stuff I need in here. So in my original class example, I want to keep my images. So I'm going to put, well, actually, you know, I'll do everything from scratch. So we can just kind of see how we would build everything. So the only thing I really want is my P5 library. I'm going to put that in there. Actually, I want to make a copy of that. So I'll just do Command-C copy and Command-C paste. And then I want to take my index.html, no reason to rewrite that, and my style.css. Okay, so let's put all of that stuff back in there. So I'll do an example of Piskel at some point. I know you guys all know how to use that, but just so you can kind of go through the process of getting things set up, since we are going to be working in a different place for the rest of the semester. So let's go back to Sublime. And I'm going to close out the main index page. I'm going to go to new class and click on index.html. And I'm going to delete some stuff in here because we want to make sure that we're going over everything we need to go over. So I'm going to change the title here to new class. And then I have my P5, and then I have sketch.js, which I haven't created yet, but I will shortly. Okay. So the next thing that I want to do is to create my sketch.js. So I'm just going to set up my scene, and then I'm going to add some graphics, and then I'm going to use classes to make my graphics move in different ways. And so in this way, I'm just like completely starting from scratch. I'm not going to be like adapting the array example like I did in the previous classes. If you want to go over the array example again, we can do that, but I think we'll just kind of do this from scratch, and then you guys can choose how you want to set up your project. So I'm going to create a new file, so Command-N, and then Command-S to save, and this is my sketch.js. And I'm going to start with a comment. So usually when I make a comment, I do Command-Option and then / or question mark. That you see that key command in the left that's the option key, the kind of weird looking one. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make a new multi-line comment. I also have my own code highlighting theme that I've installed on my computer at home. So it looks a little different than what you've seen me do in class. So hopefully that's not too distracting. Yours will probably look a little bit different. If you really want my theme, I can send it to you. But it should mostly be the same, or the same basic idea. So let's make a new comment for this page. So we'll say this is our new class example, and the date is March 19th, 2020. So let's get started. So this example is based on some of the class notes. So we're in schedule, we're under week 6, and we have class, and then we also have the class inheritance notes. And those notes are kind of based on the idea of creating a spaceship game. So what we've been doing in class is a little bit different. These notes are still pretty similar to what we're doing in class, but ours is more of just kind of a scene. So I'm not going to be referring to these notes in my lecture, but if you want to review, you can always look at those. So let's go back, and so let's get started. So we want to start out just by making our scene, and then we'll add in our images. So as usual with a P5 sketch, we always start with our function setup. So I just have, function setup with the parentheses and then my curly brackets. And of course, I'm going to create my canvas. So I'm going to say create canvas. And then we've been using window width, window height this semester so that our graphics fill up the whole screen. So I'm going to stick with that. And so after I have my setup function, I'm going to add my draw function. To draw my graphics. And so I'm going to start with just kind of the background colors of the scene. So I'm going to create a similar scene. So the first thing that we had is kind of a light blue sky. So I'm going to do background is light blue. Okay, so just a regular background. So that's going to cover the canvas in this light blue color. So that looks good. Another thing that I'm going to do now that I'm here is open up the console. So I just want to have that there. If there's any errors, I'll see them. That way I don't have to open the console again. It's just already open. So I'm also going to do Command-Shift-R to make sure that we are freshly reloaded. So there's our blue scene. And so then I'm going to start by adding the sort of sandy beach color. So I'm going to first look up the color I want to use. I'm going to go to HTML color codes. And I want like a beach color. So I'm going to go to the names and choose brown. And there's some nice colors to use here. I'll go with maybe a lighter beach this time. So maybe I'll do blanched almond. That's kind of a nice color name. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go back here. And so the background covers up the whole canvas. But now what I want to do is just fill in a little area. So the background covers up the entire canvas from all the way up here, all the way down here, etc. The whole thing. But what I want to do actually is I just want to go from here and then cover up everything down here with my sandy beach color. So to do that, I'm just going to use a rectangle. Okay, so little review of our shapes. We're just going to use a rectangle to fill in that whole area. And I'm going to start at 0x. So we're going to start on the left side and go to all the way to the other side. So that's width. And we're going to start halfway down the canvas. So y is going to be height over 2. So that'll get us halfway down. And then we want to cover up half the canvas as well. So we'll just do height over 2 for the height. So let's put that in. So I'm going to change the fill to that blanched almond color. And then I'm going to draw a rectangle. So my rectangle starts at 0. And let's just put in, we'll say, the background is the sky. This is the beach. And so our rectangle starts at 0 and height over 2. So the y value is half the height of the canvas. So that brings us halfway down. The width is width, so the entire width of the canvas. And then the height is height over 2, because we're going halfway down the canvas. We want to draw the rest of the half. So when we refresh that, I misspelled height. So let's spell that correctly. Okay, so there we get our sandy beach area. I actually don't want to have a stroke on that, so I'm going to go back up to setup and just type in no stroke. And that will get rid of that black line. So there we go. There's our beach. So let's add our ocean in front of the beach. So I want the ocean area to kind of go from here and down to here. And I'll fill in a blue color there. So I'm going to guess that this is about 1/3 of the height of the canvas. So I'm going to go down 1/3, 2/3, and then I'm going to draw another third here. So let's give that a shot. So I'm going to do a new fill. So this is the ocean. So I'm going to say fill. I need a blue color. I'm going to go back to HTML color codes. Oh, here's blue. We're already kind of there. So let's try midnight blue. That's the darkest one. Fill that in. That's in all caps for some reason on that website. It doesn't have to be, but rather than rewrite it, I'm just going to paste it there. So I'm going to do the same basic rectangle. So it starts at 0 for the left side. And then this time I'm going to do height times 2/3. So you're going to go 2/3 of the way down the canvas. I'm going to do same thing for width and then height just over 3 just to fill that last third. So let's try that. There we go. There's our ocean. So very simple so far, not very interesting, but we're going to add some graphics on top of this. This is just kind of our background color, just to fill things in. Okay, so now we're going to get started with our graphics, and this is where we're also going to start talking about classes. So let's make the graphics first, and then we'll make some classes to draw them. So I'm going to start, I'm going to use clouds, trees, and fish. So I want to make variables to hold my image graphics. So I'm going to say variable cloud image, comma, tree image, comma, fish image. And you know, we've talked about this before, but essentially what I'm saying is that these are in the global scope. They're not inside any of my functions. And what I'm doing is I'm just declaring them up here so I can preload them. I'm going to create a preload function here, which I use to load all of my graphics before I start rendering them. So I'm going to load all of my images here, but then I'm going to be drawing them down here in draw. So in order to make sure that these variables are available both to preload and draw, I have to make the variables exist first. So I'm just declaring that they exist. So I'm saying cloud image, tree image, fish image, those all exist. And that way we can use them. And so preload will know they exist and draw will know they exist. So let's make some graphics. So I'm going to go back to the browser. I'm just going to do this really quickly like I did in class, but just so you guys can kind of remember how we did this. So I'm going to go to Piskel, Piskel app.com. And here's our sprite editor. I'm going to sign in. Hopefully I remember my password. I think this is the account I used. So you can sign in. I think you guys already have accounts. I have my graphics here. I could use those. I'm just going to go over, you know, how to do it again. So I'll click Create Sprite. And I'm going to start with my clouds. So I want to make sure that these are saved. So I'm going to give them a name first, so I know that they'll be saved in my gallery if I want to get them later. So I'm going to call this the cloud and hit enter. And then I'm going to look at the size. So if I go to the resize, you can see they're 32 pixels by 32 pixels. That's probably fine. I'll leave that the way it is. This transform window, sometimes you won't see this crop option, so we might make sure to see that as well. So now let's draw some clouds. So I'm going to make a slightly bigger pen and change my color to white. And then I'm just going to draw a nice little cloud. Okay, and I'll fill it in a bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to crop that so I don't have any extra area. And then I'm just going to export it. And so you can see up here is the preview of how big this really is going to look. And that's not very big, so I want to make it a little bigger when I export it. So when I go to export down here, I'm going to click on that. I want to make sure I'm in the PNG area. If I want an animation, I can use GIF. But if I'm not using an animation, I want to go to PNG. And it's already scaled up to 6. So 192 by 126, that's kind of big. So I'm actually just going to scale to 3. So it'll be 96 pixels by 63 pixels. And then I'm going to click this first download option. So that'll download cloud.png. And then I want to make sure that that's in my folder. So I'm going to go back to the Finder. And I'm going to just open up 2 windows. So I'm going to hit Command N to open a new Finder window and go to Downloads. And you can see my cloud.png right there. And so here's my new class folder and my cloud. I'm just going to drop that in there. So I'm going to go back to Piskel. I'm going to hit Command S to save. And then I'm going to click Create Sprite to open a new window. Excuse me. And so now I'm going to draw a tree. So I'll start with the base of the tree. I need like a brown color, something like that. And so I'm going to make the pen a little bit smaller. And so this time I'm going to do like a couple trees. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. And I'm just going to draw some tree base. Okay, and then I'm going to change the color to add some leaves. So I'm going to go to the green area, get a nice green color, and just kind of draw some leaves. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. You guys can spend more time on this to make your scene look really good. I'm just kind of doing an example. So there's some leaves. That looks decent enough for a tree. So I'm going to save it. So I'm going to click Save and call this tree. Whoops. Interface is a little tricky, so tree. And then I'm going to crop again, save, and then export. So PNG. I'll keep the same scale, so I'll download that. So there's my tree. So then I'll go back to the Finder here's my tree in the downloads folder. I'm going to drag it over to the project folder. So there's my tree, and there's my cloud. Tree is actually really small for a tree. So if you feel like your image is too small, it's really easy to change that. Just go back to Piskel, move the scale up a bit. Let's try 6 and download it again. It'll have the same name, so all I have to do is drag the tree back here. It's going to ask me if I want to replace. I'm going to say replace. Now my tree is much bigger. So that looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I'm going to make my fish and then I'll be done. So I'm going to go back to Piskel. I'm going to click create sprite. And I'm going to just draw a fish. So I'll choose a color for a fish. Maybe I'll do it like kind of pink or purple. That's kind of nice. And I'm just going to draw a fish, give it a little eyeball. That's pretty much it. Maybe we can give it like a couple fins. Okay, pretty good. Now I'm kind of ruining it. Let's undo those. Okay, so I'll crop that, save it as fish. All right, and then I'm gonna export. I'm gonna scale it back down to 3. We don't need these to be huge. So then I'll go back to my Finder. Here's my fish. Okay, that's actually pretty big. I'm gonna make it smaller. So I'll just delete that one. I'll make this one a bit smaller. Just do 1. Okay, now I have my little fish. I'm gonna throw that in there. So now I have all my graphics ready to go. I can preload those and then I can add them to my project. So I'm gonna go back to Piskel. I'm gonna save. And then I'm just gonna close these out. I can always come back here later if I need to. Hopefully I save them, so I'll see those in my gallery. Yep. Okay, not bad. So let's go back to our project and let's get these guys in here. So we need to preload our images. We can now see them in Sublime in our files, so that's good. So we're just gonna go through each image. So my cloud image, and I'm going to assign it to what I get from the preload function. So our preload function takes all the image data and it reads through it and gives us the pixel, just the colors. So we can redraw that in our canvas. So I'm going to say load image, and then I'm just going to give the path name over here. So whatever the path is, since they're in the same folder, it's just the image name. So I'm going to put quotation marks and say cloud.png. I'm going to do that with each one. So my tree image is load image tree.png, and then my fish image is load image fish.png. Okay, so now I've got my images ready to go. So let's make some variables. So in this case, we're doing our classes from scratch. So instead of just kind of like rewriting some old code, I'm going to actually plan things out, which is normally how you really want to write code. So I'm going to start just by saying, okay, I want multiple fish, I want multiple trees, I want multiple clouds. So I need a list for each one so I can store them in the list. The other thing I need is the number of each that I want. So let's start setting that up. So these are our global values. So I'm going to say for each one I have my clouds, and that's just going to be empty array. So remember arrays, if I have 2 brackets, it's just an empty list, and we're going to push elements onto it when we go to our setup function. So I have the clouds list, and then I have the number of clouds I want. So variable num clouds, and I forget what we did before. I'll just do 5 clouds for now. We can always change it later. So then let's do our trees. So I have a list of trees. Okay, so then I'll have a number of trees. I'll just do 2 trees. You could also randomize this so it changes every time you load the scene. But you can't use random in the global scope, so you'd have to do it in the setup function. So then we have the number of fish. So I'm going to do an array for our fish. So I'll say fish equals, and And fish is actually its own plural. So I have like clouds for cloud, trees for trees. The plural of fish is fish. So I'm just going to use fish here. Hopefully I'll figure something out if I need to later. So the fish is going to be an empty list. Let me put a thing here, empty array / list. Array and list basically mean the same thing. And then we have a num fish. So we had a lot of fish last time. We can start with like 10. So now we want to create our clouds and our trees and our fish. And so there's a certain thing we need to know about each one of these objects before we can put them on the screen. So we need to know, let me get my drawing tool. So if we want to put a cloud right here with our image, we need to know a couple things. So here's our cloud. We need to know the point where we're drawing it. So that's the X, Y position. And since we're going to do animation, we're actually going to use that to move across the screen. The other thing we need to know is just what is this image? What is the cloud image? So for each one of our objects, whether it's a cloud, a tree, or a fish, we know 3 values that we need is X, Y, and the image. So we're going to create our class based on this idea. We're going to say there's a simple idea of a thing in our scene, and it needs to have a position, it needs to have an image. And then we'll add on to that as we create new classes. So let's make our first class. We're actually going to have to do like a for loop and stuff, but let's make our class first. So I'm going to put my Sublime window into split view so that we can see both the class and our main sketch. So I'm going to go to view and go to layout and go to 2 columns. And so here's our first class. I'm going to just save this as, and I'm going to call this thing capital T.js and click save. And so one thing I have to do for this to work is I have to add this script here. And it has to go in between P5 and sketch because it has to exist before we get to the sketch.js. So I'm going to say script source is thing.js. And again, it's capitalized. We normally don't capitalize our file names, but the class in JavaScript is always capitalized. So in order to match that, we're just going to use a capital letter. And it'll make it a little easier for us to see, okay, this thing.js is probably a class versus sketch.js, which is our main program. So over in thing.js, I'm just going to say class capital T thing, and then go straight to the curly brackets. With the class, we don't have the parentheses after the class name. So one of the things we need in our class is a constructor. So a class is kind of like a blueprint for all of the things. And then a constructor is the function that actually makes each individual thing. So each individual cloud or tree or fish. So I'm going to make a constructor. And I'm going to give it the values that we know it needs. It needs an X value, a Y value, and an image value. So I'm just going to use img as a shorthand. And the first thing that I do in the constructor is I just actually assign those arguments to the constructor itself. So I say this.x equals x. Basically, this is a keyword here. So this refers to each instance of the object. So that's way it can keep track of its own x, its own y, and its own image. So we just repeat that for each argument. This.x equals x. This.y equals y, and this.image equals image. And so each one of our objects, even though they draw different things and in different places, they all consist of a position and an image that we draw. Okay, so now we can create our things in setup. So what we want to do is we want to repeatedly create the things, and we know how many we want of each because we have num clouds, num trees, and num fish. So when I want to repeat something, I use a for loop. So I'm going to put a comment here. So we're going to create our things. And so we'll start with the cloud. So I'll say for, and I'm just counting. So I'm just going to use I for index, let I equal 0. I'm going to start counting at 0. And then I is less than num clouds. Okay, so basically I will start at 0, and then we'll do I++, so it'll go up by 1 each time. And so it'll start at 0, we'll add a cloud, it'll go to 1, it'll add a cloud, go to 2, 3, 4. Then when it gets to 5, so I will be equal to 5 here. So I will be 5, num clouds is 5. So 5 is not bigger than 5, right? So that's when our loop will stop. So let's give that a try. So once we're inside of our loop, we're just going to create a cloud, and then we're going to push it onto the clouds list. So I'm going to make a new cloud. I'm going to say let cloud equal new thing. Okay, so we haven't actually created our separate classes yet. So right now, everything is a thing. So we're going to make a new thing, and the X position, let's just choose some random numbers. So we'll just say random width for the X position. For the Y position, I'll also say random height. Well, actually, let's think about this a bit more. So we need an X, we need a Y, and then we know we're giving it the cloud image. Okay, so let's think about X. So X can be, our clouds can be anywhere on this scene. So let's just say random width, and we can update this later if we want to. But for Y, we want our clouds to stay above in this like light blue area. So we know that that goes down to height over 2. That's our first sky area. So let's say Y is random, but we're only going to say height over 2. So the values will be between 0, which is up here, and height over 2, which is down here. So it'll be some random value here, here, or whatever, but it won't go down here. So that way we know that Y will be in the top of the canvas. So then we'll create our cloud, and then we'll push the cloud onto our clouds list. So we'll say clouds.push cloud. Okay, let's repeat that process for our trees and the fish. Or actually, let's draw the clouds first, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we've got our list of clouds. So if I reload my page and I type clouds in here, you'll see that I have 5 things in the list, and each thing has its own X and Y and its own image. So they can draw themselves. And so if we want them to draw, what we're going to have to do is actually use the exact same for loop and then use another function in our thing class to display them. So I'm going to copy this for loop and paste it down here. So I'll say this is our clouds. So let's say draw the clouds. So we need to loop over all the clouds again. And so we're creating the clouds here, but when we loop over the clouds, we already have the list of clouds. So we'll just say clouds and then reference each cloud at I. So our list of clouds looks like this. If we start with I is 0, we'll get the first cloud. I is 1, we'll get this second cloud here. I is 2, so 3 and 4. So if we just go through the same list, we can do something with each cloud by using our array syntax, clouds, and then square brackets at I. And I just want to draw the cloud, so I'm just going to say .draw. And then in my thing class, so I can kind of keep my code in separate places, in the thing class, I'm just going to add a new method or function called draw. And that's actually a really easy one. I'm just going to say I'm drawing an image, so I use the image function. And the image function needs an image, so I'm going to say this.img. That's a reference to our image. And then it needs an x value, so we'll say this.x, and a y value, this.y. So now when we reload our page, we should see some clouds. And they should be kind of randomly placed in the scene. Okay, so that looks good. Let's add our other shapes, and then we'll add some animation in a bit. Okay, so let's add in our trees and our fish. So we're basically going to repeat this exact same process. So for the trees, we say for let I equals 0, start counting at 0. I is less than num trees, I plus plus, so we count up by 1. So let's choose an x value for the tree. So let x, we can just do random width again. And for y, we want to keep the trees kind of in here. So this is height over 2 here, and this is height times 2 over 3 here. So we can choose that as our random range. So we'll say let y equal random. So the lowest random value is height over 2. The highest random value is height times 2 over 3. And so then let's create our tree. So we'll say let tree. And again, we're just making a thing because we don't have different types of things yet. We just have the one basic thing. So we'll say new thing, X and Y. And then for this one, we have the tree image. Once we create the new thing, we add it to our list of trees. So we say trees.push our tree. And so now I don't have to write any more code because the tree behaves exactly the same way that the tree behaves exactly the same way that the cloud does. So to draw my trees, I just do the same thing. So draw trees. So a new for loop. So we're counting through our trees. So for let I equals 0, I is less than num trees, I plus plus. And then we just say trees at I dot draw. So basically for each instance of the tree, we're calling this draw function. So one draw function is all we need to do to draw all these clouds and all these trees. Okay, there's our trees. Okay, I screwed up a little bit because the trees actually draw from the top down. So we need to actually place the trees kind of like from 1/3 to 1/2 actually. So we can fix that. That's not too bad. Let's go back up to let y equals random. So let's just do the minimum value is height over 3. The maximum value is height divided by 2, so half the canvas. Okay, so we have our trees, we have our clouds. That looks pretty good. It is random, so sometimes the trees are very clumped together, sometimes they're not, but that's okay. And then we don't see it that often, but sometimes the trees are covering up the clouds. So remember the order that we put things in matters. So if I want the clouds on top, which I think looks better, then I need to move these clouds down to here. Okay, so now, there we go. So you can see the cloud goes on top of the tree. So that looks a bit better. So now let's add our fish. So same thing up here. We add a new for loop. For let I equals 0, I is less than num fish, I plus plus. So same thing for x, I guess. Just let x equal random width. I guess we could put that directly in our constructor. But then we'd have to change a bunch of stuff, so let's just leave it. And then the fish need to go below here. So we'll just say let y equal, we'll start at height times 2/3, and we'll go all the way down to height. And then we'll say let fish, oh, we can't use fish actually because that's the name of our list. So I'll just call this f for fish equals new thing, x, y, and fish image. And then we'll push that onto our fish list. So we'll say fish.push that new fish f. Then we have to draw our fish. So let's scroll back down to draw. And I could just copy and paste these because they're exactly the same. So draw the fish for let I equals 0. I is less than num fish. I plus plus, count by 1. Fish at I dot draw. So now we'll get all of our fish and our trees and our clouds. So that looks pretty nice, but the main thing that we're missing now is our animation. And so that's when we kind of want to use what's called class inheritance. So basically, the way that that works is we have this one idea of a thing, right? Okay, so let's, so we have a thing like this. And the thing has X, Y, and image. And it also has a draw function, so it knows how to draw itself. But what it doesn't know how to do is move. And our trees are not going to move, but our clouds are going to move, and our fish are going to move slightly different way. So the trees are fine just being things. They don't need any other functionality. But what we can do is we can make another thing called a cloud. And we can say that the cloud basically extends or is a child of this thing. So that means it gets the X, Y, the image, the draw, and we just need to add in, we can call it move or animate or update. I'm just going to call it update. So we need an update function for the cloud, and we also need a separate update function for the fish. So that will tell it how to move, but it won't interfere with any of the original X and Y and image and draw properties. So this is our superclass up here, the thing, and then our subclasses down here will be things with extra properties. So let's get rid of that and write it in some code. So I have my thing. I'm going to make a new file for my clouds first. So this is a class cloud with a capital C again. And it is going to do a new thing called extends thing. So when I say extends thing, I have to save it first. So I'm going to save this as capital cloud.js. And of course I have to also add it to index.html. So I'm going to add a new script tag here. Source is capital C cloud.js, and then close script. So the cloud extends the thing. What that means is that the constructor and the draw, once I create a cloud, it's just going to already have this stuff in it. So everything I add in here is just added onto what already exists in here. So with the cloud, I don't really need to change anything. I just need to add what's called an update function. So we're going to say update, and I'm just going to move X. So X is going to move every frame. So I'm going to say this.x plus equals, and then I'll just choose a number. Let's just say 5. We can change that if it's too fast or too slow. So that's really all I'm going to do with cloud for now. I'm going to make one more thing to kind of control it, but let's move this over here. So for that update function to work, I have to call it in my main sketch. So after I say clouds.draw, I'm just going to say clouds at I dot update as well. So it's going to draw first, and then it's going to update. We could do it the other way around. It doesn't really matter. But what the update is going to do is it's just going to move X over 5 pixels. Uh-oh, did I spell this right? Oh, you know what? I'm getting this error because my clouds are still things. So now that I have the cloud class, I need to actually make sure to change the class. So up here where I'm creating the clouds right here, instead of new thing, this is now new cloud. Everything else can stay the same. And you might say, why is this variable and this the same? But they're actually different, right? This is a capital C and this is a lowercase c. So it'll let me get away with that. If they were both lowercase or both capital, that would be a problem. But for now, I can do this. So let's try that again. There we go. Our clouds are moving, and they're actually moving quite fast. So let's slow them down a bit. Let's say 2 instead of 5. Okay, now they're moving nice and slow. One thing that we do have a problem with, though, is that the way we've written it now, X is just going up and up and up and up. So what we need to do is say, as our clouds are moving, if our cloud gets this far, so the origin is past the width of the canvas right here, then we just need to cycle it back around here. So we're going to go to 0 first. So let's try that. So after we update the speed, we just want to test to see, is the X gone past the side of the canvas, which means we can't see it anymore. So we're going to say if this.x is greater than width, then this.x equals 0. And actually, I'm going to change that a little bit, and I'll show you why. So now when I reload the page, you'll see the clouds reappearing. But part of the problem is that they reappear right here. So they just like jump onto the screen. We want them to actually like start here so that they can slowly animate onto the screen. So to do that, we can't just go back to 0 because the cloud is drawn from 0 to the right. We have to actually go back a little bit this way. And we kind of can just use the image of the cloud to know how far back to go. So we're going to go 0 minus the image of the cloud, which is really just negative image of the cloud. So instead of 0, I'm going to say minus this.image.width. So that tells me the width of the cloud. So let's try that again. Now it should kind of animate back onto the screen. So that looks a lot more realistic. But, you know, not necessary. You might like the way it looks when it just like pops back into the screen. So you could try that as well. All right, so let's add in our fish, and then we'll be done. So our fish are going to move a little differently. So I'm going to create a different class for the fish. So I'm going to create a new file. and save as, and this is capital F fish.js. Okay, so I have class fish. Again, they extend the thing, so extends thing, but the fish are a little bit different, and I'm gonna go over why. So I'm gonna add in a new script here. Okay, so we have our new script. I'm gonna go over why we need to actually, so for our fish, we actually need a constructor here. And even though our cloud doesn't have a constructor, it just uses the default constructor. For our fish, we're actually gonna add a couple parameters so that they can move at different speeds to add a little variation to our animation. So the fish, what we're gonna do is it's gonna add its own constructor. And so the way that that works is if something has a constructor, this constructor here, since our fish is our subclass and our thing is the superclass, this constructor overwrites this constructor, but we still have access to it by using super. If we say super in here, what that actually means is we're calling this constructor over here. So that's how we're going to solve that. So we still get the same arguments, x, y, image, and we're just going to send them directly to our superclass. So we're going to say super xy image. So that, again, the super function here calls the constructor of the class that we're extending, which is the thing. So then I'm just going to add a couple extra parameters. So our fish are going to animate a little differently. So I'm going to add an x speed. So we'll say x speed. We'll say, let's try 2. Actually, let's make them faster than the cloud. So let's try 3. And then this dot y speed. So they're going to be moving up and down as well as to the right. So I'm going to use 1 there. So everything else will stay the same. So let's move this back over here. But just like our cloud has, we want an update function for our fish. So we'll go in here, we'll say update. And so for that to work, we need to add a couple things back in sketch.js. So first, here's our fish down here in the setup function. So instead of adding new things for the fish, we need to add new fish. And then when we're drawing the fish down in the draw function, we need to say fish.draw and fish@i.update. So to update our fish, let's move them to the right first. So we're going to say this.x plus equals this.x speed. Okay, so instead of just using a number, we're going to use a variable, because what we're going to do is actually add some randomness here to get some variation. So we're going to increase by x speed each time. So now our fish should be moving. Okay, that looks pretty good, but it looks weird, right? Because our fish, they shouldn't all be moving exactly the same speed. They're, animals. So let's change that. Instead of 3, let's say random between 2 and 4. So they'll all move at slightly different speeds. Okay, so now we have like a fast fish right here, a slow fish here. We need to do the same thing where we need to get our fish to go back to the beginning. So let's add in that code. So we already know that if this.x is greater than width, then we go back to the beginning. So we say this.x equals negative this.image.width. Same thing that we had for our clouds. So now we've got our fish wrapping around. So again, just to be clear, what's happening here is each fish has an x value. That x value keeps going like this. Once x is greater than width, so this is width, if x is like, whatever number this is over here, then it will be greater than width. So what we want to do is set it back to the beginning. So we just set it to a number over here, which is the fish image width. So then it can go back onto the screen. So that's our x. Let's start animating the y. So our x is random. That's why we have a variable there. For a y, we actually need a variable because we're going to change it a different way. So let's update y. So we'll say this.y plus equals this.y speed. So now the fish are moving down. But now we have the same problem. It looks cool that they're going down, but once they get to the bottom of the canvas, we can't see them anymore. So we could wrap them back up to the top, but that would look kind of weird. So what I want to do instead is just bounce them up and down like this. So we're going to say if we get to here, then we're going to change the speed. So the speed for y is positive in this direction, so we go down a little bit each frame. But once we get to here, we're just going to flip that to go up a little bit. And we're going to keep doing that until we get up here, and then we're going to go down again. So how do we code that? So similar thing, if this dot y is greater than height. And we actually need to change that just a little bit, because if we actually wait till we get to the height, we're going to be below, the whole fish will be below the bottom of the screen. So we don't want that. So let's subtract the height of the fish from that. So we'll say this dot image dot height. So if y is greater than that, what we're going to do is we're going to take this speed and we're going to reverse it. So we're going to say, you know, times -1. So if I have like 5 times -1, I get -5. If I have -5 times -1, I have 5. So I'm just like flipping it between negative and positive. So we say this dot y speed times equals, so we're taking the value, multiplying it by -1, and then assigning it back to itself. So times equals -1. So now our fish bounce. Doesn't look really realistic, but at least they say on the screen. But now the problem is they're going out of the ocean and they're flying into the sky. So we need to bounce them off the top too. So we can review. So this is one condition. If we want to add a second condition, we can use or. So that's the 2 lines, which is the backslash right above the return key. So or if this dot y is less than height times 2/3. That's where height times 2/3 is where this ocean starts. So that's where we want them to bounce off. Although it's kind of cool that to have the fish in the sky. So, you know, maybe that's not the end of the world. Maybe, you know, if you're doing something kind of funny, you could do that. Anyway, let's see if that works. So same thing here. If we hit the bottom, we go negative. If we hit the top, we are negative. So we just we multiply by -1. That reverses it. And so we'll be positive again. So now our fish should stay in that bottom area. All right, not too bad. So there's a lot more we could do with this. I've been going for a while, so I'm going to stop here. And there's a lot more stuff that you could do that would be interesting. So if you have other ideas for stuff that you want to do, put a comment on Blackboard or even on the YouTube video, wherever you want to do it, or just email me. And if it's something simple, I can just like email you some code. If it's a little more complex, I could, you know, add stuff in a new shorter video. So if you have any thoughts or ideas for what you want to do, please let me know. But I'm going to stop here. This is a little long because we did the setup in the beginning. The video tutorials hopefully be a little shorter going forward, but you know, this is going to be a learning process, so we'll figure things out as we go. So I'm going to post this hopefully tomorrow, which is going to be Friday, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Okay, one thing that I did want to cover that I forgot to do is uploading and submitting the file. So again, you guys know how to do this. It's just review. But since you're probably on a new computer, you may want to be going through these steps again. You may not have done it yet. So just so we have everything covered. So I've got my file. I've got my project to where I want it. And now I need to upload it and submit it on GitHub. So what I can do is go to GitHub. You can see there's all these new files here. So you should see something like that. So I just need to make a commit. So I'm going to add a commit summary. I'm going to say adds new class example and commit to master. And then just click push. And then from here, if I want to submit it on Blackboard, I can go to view on GitHub. And that'll open up in your browser. And if you're signed in, I'm actually signed in as a different thing. So I'm just going to go to a incognito tab real quick. I have a couple GitHub accounts, so you shouldn't have to deal with this. So I'm just going to sign in and create my, and go to my link. Okay, so this is the code. You don't need to post that on GitHub, but it's useful to have it here in case you can send that to me if you have questions. But you want to post the live link. So you can go to settings. You probably already have this set up, but you can go to settings and scroll down to GitHub pages. If you click on this, it'll go away from github.com, so you may want to drag this up into the browser, or you can left click and say new tab, or you can hold command and then click. All of those different ways will open up the new tab, and you should see your username.github.io/mmp310 here. You can click on the new class or whatever your thing is called, and you should see the project here. You do want to look at it and make sure it looks right before you submit it, and that's the link that you'll submit on GitHub. So again, you guys already know this, but just want to recover everything since we are kind of in some ways starting our semester from scratch. Just make sure everybody has everything set up. So that's GitHub. If you have any questions with that, let me know and we can go over it, but I think you guys should be good.